Welcome to Business Success Navigators, brought to you by Empowering Business Inc. I'm Robyn Scobey, and today I'm with Henry. Henry, welcome to the show. Can you introduce yourself and tell us who you are a little bit?
Yeah, Robyn, thank you so much for having me on your show. Really happy to be here. As I said earlier, even though I'm based in Ontario, I'm a very strong proponent and supporter of businesses in Alberta, having visited many times. And that's really through my branding and ad agency based here in Toronto. What I do these days is spend a lot of time advising companies and counseling founders on extracting their brand and building up their entity around whether it's their personal brand or their company brand. A lot of it's covered in a book I've just completed and is published and out in the netherworlds of publishing called Telling Your Story.
Wonderful. So where would people find your book to begin with?
In chapters in Amazon, probably that may be the easiest to order from. And just simply look up Telling Your Story, Henry Wong, and there it is.
Wonderful. But when you talk about branding, what does that actually mean? What is that?
Yeah, I think that's a good fundamental question because many people perceive branding as simply my logo or the name to the company or simply this ethereal sort of entity around what the company or the person might be. In reality, what it is I very much view the brand as the added value to your company, and expressing it is really done through a story, and you can shortcut it using your logo or through a few words or a tagline, but really it's what you stand for, what you mean to your public, to your customers, to your internal stakeholders, to your employees, and there's a defined value that goes against it. So in the end, if I were to define what a brand is, it really is about that premium value that you can attach to what you have as a business.
So if we broke this down, so if you were a plumber, let's say, we'll just pick on plumbers today. If you were a plumber, how would you make your brand? What would be some of your ideas that you would suggest?
Yeah, so I think the fundamental for many people is, and again, going back to what I said earlier, it's more than the name and it's more than the logo, because many people think I've done the brand, and that really is. It's defining what you stand for, and as a plumber is no different than any other business. You have to try to attract business, you have to retain business. So what do you stand for that you can communicate to people? Then that's often done through story. It could be the wonderful customer service that you have. It could be the advanced technology or tools that you might have at your disposal. It could be the crew. It could be any number of these things. Defining that and really putting it out there really does become your brand.
That's a really good point, right? Like, it's not always, we think of brands as the check mark with Nike, and that is a part of it, but there is so much more to it.
Absolutely. If I said the word Volvo, what do you immediately think of? And typically the word is safety. And any master brand, any very strong brand has a single word that's attached to it. So for many businesses, what do you want to stand for? What do you want people to think of when they see the logo or think of your name?
Mm-hmm. So if you had to give any business any idea or any one big tip, how do you make that one word?
Oh, yeah. So I cover that as you've probably seen in my book, and I think that is a key part of it, because when you can boil it down to a single word, then you really understand what you're all about. Many people, particularly if you're asked to, you may be in a networking event or you meet someone for the first time, it's often called the elevator pitch, and they say, "Well, tell me about yourself," or "Tell me about your business," and many people are at a loss for words, or they begin to ramble and they get off on a tangent, or they tell the history of the company rather than what you mean and what you stand for. So the exercise or the ability to boil it down to a single word helps you understand what your brand is all about. We often default to the big brands when we think of things that have that sort of masterful approach. So things like Nike, for example, you think winning in competition. Apple, you think innovation. That's a very sort of big. They've spent billions and millions of dollars to be able to achieve that. Much harder for us smaller entrepreneurs or business owners in itself, but the same principles apply. You stand for something, and once you define it and you live it and you put it out there, whether through a little bit of advertising or the way in which you build your reputation, you become known for it. And really it comes down to that. Begin understanding it, get feedback from your customers, get feedback from your staff, look at what you have very objectively and try to define it. There's a little bit of an exercise that I often run my clients through, and that's creating a little bit of a whiteboard, getting some sticky notes and simply putting all the words that you feel you stand for, and you begin to see where the pattern is and what might rise to the top and what is at the top of the pyramid of what that one word is that you stand for.
There was something in there. You said reputation. What are you?
Mm-hmm.
That really struck me. The reputation of your company. So I know we all talk about what you stand for, but my personal values are different sometimes than my business, not my values, what I'm going to do. As a business owner, I want to sell my product or sell my service. And I try to upsell, where on my personal side, I personally go, do I really need that before I purchase it, right? So, but it's your reputation and how you want the community and your customers to perceive you as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head quite well, because often there is that little bit of a disconnect between, building up your business versus what you are as an individual in your own philosophy and belief system. I'm a little bit more in the belief that all of that should align. I believe true happiness really comes from when the two are aligned. When you're something you're not, or you try to push for something that you don't necessarily believe in, that really creates a lot of disharmony and unhappiness. So I think particularly for many of us business owners, who run a company or enterprise, part of the reason we went into this is because we want to be our own boss. We want to not work for somebody and be forced to do something that we're not comfortable with. So, you as the business leader can define that. You can determine how you want to go to market. In and itself, many people talk about how, sometimes you have to be cutthroat, sometimes you have to do things a little bit more underhanded, and that may be part of your personality anyway. And I'm not here to judge one way or the other, but if you find yourself being forced to do something, or you feel that you're doing something that compromises your own ethics, then you have to really question why you're in the business in the first place. Because if that wasn't the reason why you went into it, then stick to what you're all about, because your reputation, what you're building and what you let people know about you, certainly will come back in spades. And I've seen this with the many entrepreneurs I've worked with. I've seen this so many times with myself, where, I'll give you an example. Even with my own company, own agency, a number of years ago, I decided I would only want to work with companies that would have a positive impact on society. And I thought that would probably restrict the type of businesses that would come to me. In fact, what I found, it actually built up my business even more so, because that's what I became known for. And I have been at a stage, as I said offline with you, I've been having to turn away business because I can't take on that much. But it really shows that when you stand for something and you believe in something, whether it's by methodology or simply the law of attraction, it begins to happen for you.
That's very true, because you do need to be genuine. Like, you can't change your core values at all, because that is who you are. That's what you stand for. What I was more meaning was, I am also, like, I'm naturally just a giver. So I would want to give everything, even though I can't as a business owner. I have to get paid for my services, or I can't just give away everything. Even though if I owned a grocery store, I'd probably feed all the homeless and still have nothing for myself. So some of that, but that doesn't mean you can't have the branding of I am going to go help these other people, but you just have to put a little bit of barricades or boundaries around yourself so that you don't overextend.
Absolutely. But there also may be a way in which you can share it. We exist in a world where there's so much competition, and we're often encouraged to do a form of thought leadership or share your expertise in some way. That doesn't necessarily mean giving away your service, but what you're doing is using it as a way to demonstrate your expertise, particularly in professional services. But with a product, you can see and judge and base it on the merits of that product. With services, it's a little bit more difficult, because how do you get a sense of what that person or that company is about in providing that service if you don't actually use it? So as a business owner and a business leader, you may find that there's a good opportunity to share a little bit of your knowledge without necessarily doing the work, but advising the person in such a way that the customer becomes so enamored, so impressed by your knowledge that there's no other choice. So it's the same thing with, we'll use the example of the plumber. The ones I've dealt with in the past aren't the ones that's necessarily who simply give me a quote and this is what I'm going to provide. It's the ones who share their expertise. They explain what the problem is. They outline what I need to fix. And whether I go with them or not is really up to me. But now I understand the problem. But at the same time, that's given me confidence in the service that the person is providing. So it's a natural way of selling and sharing your knowledge, but not necessarily giving things away.
Absolutely. I have an entire chapter on that about educating in my book of Cash Flow Playbook, the Cash Flow Club Playbook. And it is about educating your clients, your customers, however you want to say it. If that's doing YouTubes, doing podcasts, doing little reels on Facebook, there's so many ways. Are you going to educate them and teach them why one candle is better than another because of toxins? Are you going to, as the plumber, are you going to remind your clients, change your furnace filter? It's going to save you how much? Or before it freezes, make sure you take off your water from your outside tap, right? Like when you
Simple
talk
things.
about giving, just teaching and sharing your knowledge. There is so much work out there for every entrepreneur that we don't need to hoard it and build those relationships.
And it is a good way of promoting yourself. And I call it a little bit of the Martha Stewart effect, because if you look at her brand and how popular she is and was, through her shows, she demonstrated how to make a souffle. But you were so enamored with what she did and looking at her techniques that you began consuming her products, buying her plates, buying her cookbooks, getting her expertise, watching her buying the magazines and so forth. But by sharing that information, she was really giving away free advice. You didn't have to buy the magazine. You could watch her show. You could watch her videos. So that helped to build her brand, build everything around her. Then she became, of course, the expert within that sort of domestic world that she fostered.
That is so true. So what other tips would you give somebody?
I think in terms of building your brand, I think the simple thing, and we touched on it earlier, which is really, to be true to yourself, make sure that it lives up to what you have looked to create. But ultimately, what you're doing with a brand is trying to determine your value proposition. And it's what I often refer to as the how are you better or faster or stronger than perhaps the competition? What can you provide that it will be of value to people that may be a little bit more? And if you can begin to understand that, then that's really where you can begin shaping your brand with all of that. So with a lot of the work that's done, it's really the groundwork, and many people are looking at the same time. Well, how do I get my name out there, or how do I build that sort of reputation? But often, that first bit comes from that word of mouth, and unfortunately, we live in a world of Google reviews and people who are consumer activists who will very easily jump on you for the wrong move. you know it's not that you have to tread so carefully, but definitely take advantage of those wonderful reviews that can get your name up on Google, can get you out there. And many people ignore that. I was looking at one business yesterday who had totally ignored it. They hadn't answered any of the Google reviews. They were at a 3.9, but they had the opportunity to address some of those concerns or encourage some of their, because they had great fans, great customer base, to encourage them to post those reviews. And that in itself often is the default, as you know, when we were checking people out. That's the reputation that exists online.
That is so true. We often forget about those reviews all the time because they're there, but that is what new people are going to be looking at.
Absolutely. And it's not something that has to cost you any money. The way the Google algorithm works, of course, is if you keep it updated by posting even things like your hours, photos, for example, making sure the map is there, making sure the address is there, it helps to further optimize that. So it's a good tool to begin with. If you haven't looked at it, that would be probably the first thing I would take a look at.
Because we do still have phone books, but it's definitely Google is the way that most people are looking and researching other than word of mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That is a really good point. So we're just about out of time for today. Is there anything else you want to let our listeners know about?
No, I think, part of being an entrepreneur is this wonderful journey and fun that we go through. You're trying to, maybe building a brand and building your business around it. But, my only advice to many companies is don't forget to have fun along the way and stay true to yourself.
That is a really good point. Don't forget to have the fun along the way. I love it. And again, the name of your book?
Telling Your Story, Building Your Brand, available on Amazon.
Perfect. I think it would be a great read. I will go and order it today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Robyn, for having me.